In the depths of a dungeon, an adventurer wandering around grinding to gain the experience he needs. But unfortunately for him, he walked straight into a boss battle and he didn't quick save before he got here, so he is screwed. Against a monster like that with the whole introduction animation, he stands zero chance with his subpar equipment and weak skill level. So he just stands there and awaits death, with his only regret being that he never got the chance to become a mithril ranked adventurer. That day the adventurer died, but sometime later his body, or what is left of it, begins to move again. He doesn't understand why he is still alive because he is certain that he definitely got cooked by the boss, but to his horror he looks in a puddle and discovers he has become even skinnier than he was before. Up on the surface, adventurers usually start their day early, but that's not because they want to, it is because they are poor. The only people who get to sleep until noon are rich people or researchers with a coffee addiction and a sleeping disorder. Though he may be biased because he knows a researcher who would tell him that she sometimes gets so hyper-fixated on her research that she forgets to sleep. He should probably go check on her at some point to make sure she doesn't end up killing herself. With that said, neither of those conditions apply to our MC Rento, who is currently struggling to pay the rent as a bronze adventurer. He has to wake up early because the quests that are available to be taken care of first come, first served type of deal, so you've got to be there on time if you don't want to get stuck with the terrible ones. But if you don't end up finding any quests that are suitable for you, then you're going to have to go into the labyrinth to make ends meet. And on this day, that is exactly what happened to Rent, so he decided to go into the labyrinth of Moon's Reflection. Most adventurers work in teams, but Rent often works solo. He says there are a number of reasons for this, but the main one is that he sucks at being an adventurer. In fact, is still in bronze rank after having been an adventurer for over 10 years now. As long as he can hunt and sell materials to the guild, he will be able to survive on the money they pay him. So surprisingly, Rent's life is actually pretty stable, especially considering he saved up enough money in case of emergencies, so he's already better than most regular people. He headed into the labyrinth, but on this day, the calm, analytical mind that has allowed him to survive as an adventurer went on vacation because he found something that should have been impossible. As he walked through the labyrinth, which had had every inch of it explored, there was a hole in the wall just sitting there. This wasn't recorded on the map, so Rent believed it must be a new passageway that was created by the labyrinth. This was a major discovery, and also when his brain went on vacation, so against better judgment, he entered the clearly dangerous hidden room. The further in he goes, the more convinced he is that must be an unexplored area, and the only thing going through his mind is the thought of what amazing treasures may be lying here, waiting to be discovered, not realizing that there would probably be something guarding that treasure, but even if there isn't anything he can get, just delivering this information to the guild would be enough to get him a lot of money. So he continues to explore the dungeon without a care in the world. Normally, he would have avoided a place like this, but being blinded by all the rewards he could earn, he ventured into this dangerous place without any backup or method of scouting out danger. And his recklessness only got him into trouble as he came face to face with a dragon. And not just any dragon either, this angel-looking monstrosity was a true dragon. The legends say they are able to take on many forms, and it often differs from what would be considered normal for a dragon, but as it slowly approached Rent, even though he had never actually seen one in person before, he was sure that this must be a dragon. Its presence alone was enough to freeze Rent in place out of fear, but even if he was able to move against a being that stands at the apex of monsters as a bronze adventurer, Rent stood absolutely no chance. Yet here is still somewhat alive despite being eaten by a dragon, but that only means he must have come out the other side. He's glad to still be alive, but this doesn't really count as being alive. He is now a skeleton, an undead monster. He thinks about going back to town to figure things out, but then he realizes that the second he steps out of the labyrinth, he is going to be captured and purified until there is nothing left, so he decides not to go there for now. He tries to keep calm and think about this rationally so he doesn't end up making any huge mistakes, but first he grabs his sword and gets up. He doesn't feel the presence of that dragon anywhere nearby, but it is better to be safe than sorry, so he leaves the area and heads back into the labyrinth. He continues to wander around looking for an adventurer to talk to, but they are all probably going to a more popular dungeon now. If he waits a few days, he may be able to find a solo adventurer coming from through and ask him for help, but if he wants to do that, he's going to need to be able to talk first, and he doesn't have a mouth anymore. From around the corner, Rent notices a skeleton just standing there, but once it finally sees him, it still chooses to attack despite Rent being a skeleton as well. Rent readies his sword to swing on the skeleton, but as he charges towards it, he realizes that his transformation into a skeleton has come with one major debuff. All of his gym gains are gone. With his bony structure, he is now unable to even swing his sword without falling over because he is so weak, but fortunately, The same goes for the skeleton that is attacking him as it falls over on itself and loses a leg. While it tries to reattach itself, Rent just laughs and thinks of a strategy to defeat it. While he's no skin and all bones like this, you won't be able to use the swordsmanship skills that require you to have actual muscle, but his decision-making brain comes back from vacation and he remembers that he can use his special ability, Spirit. He manages to activate the ability just as the other skeleton reattach its leg and they are set to fight again. But this time, while they are still both skeletons, Rent has something to give him an edge. His spirit ability, which enhances his bones and allows him to actually use his sword to fight like he normally would. So as the skeleton runs up to him, he cracks it over the head with the sword and sidesteps before smashing it all together. A skeleton has been defeated and Rent gives a sigh of relief that he managed to survive, but the body of the dead skeleton began to glow to his surprise and green energy flowed into him from it. Rent notices that the energy he has expended in that fight had been replenished in an instant, so he wonders if this might be the mysterious attribute that monsters have. He remembers his researcher friends talking about how monsters are able to become more powerful with age and experience, but is on a different level from what is possible for a human to do. A skeleton would always be a skeleton, but in some rare cases, it will be able to evolve into a ghoul. That is because of existential evolution, something that she was currently researching at the time. Rent thinks he can use this to his advantage since ghouls have flesh and almost look exactly like a human, so if he were able to transform into one, he might also be able to get back into the city if he disguises himself with a robe and a mask or something. So he now has his new goal of slaying monsters in this dungeon and becoming a ghoul. Back with his researcher friend, she is feeling a little lonely since Rent isn't showing up to her house like he usually does, but she accepts that he won't be coming today, so she goes to get dinner ready. In the labyrinth, Rent has successfully killed 5 skeletons so far and is steadily gaining experience and agility as he levels up. It also seems like the light that he absorbs has some kind of recovery effect, so he is able to keep using his spirit indefinitely. With how well things are going for him, Rent decides it may be time to try challenging one of the stronger monsters in the labyrinth. He walks through the halls until he comes face to face with a slime, and though they are resistant to physical attacks, they can easily be defeated with magic. But unfortunately, Rent is not talented enough to have offensive magic at his disposal. At best, he can only use basic spells for everyday activities, so he is forced to use physical attacks to defeat it. There are 2 methods to accomplish this. One, he can either break through the slime's core that is constantly moving around in its body, or he can destroy the gelatinous body to the point that it is beyond regeneration. But he isn't strong enough to do that normally and is going to have to go all out just to not get himself dissolved by the slime. The slime launches 3 acid balls at Rent in an attempt to dissolve him, but he dodges and goes in for a strike, and luckily, he managed to hit the slime's core and defeat it. Back on the surface, a guild receptionist gets asked if she can help a new adventurer find a good party to team up with. The girl is inexperienced, but she is good with handling a sword, so she isn't completely unneeded. Unfortunately, there weren't any parties that were a good fit for her, so the receptionist was planning to ask Rent to take care of her in the meantime, but he hasn't returned to the town since the previous day, which is out of character for him. Back in the labyrinth, Rent is taking a break, but he realizes that he doesn't get sleepy anymore and he has no appetite since he has no stomach. Since he can basically run on a broke college student's routine, he tries fighting through the entire night, but even that wasn't enough to get him his evolution. Still, it's not all bad since when he first woke up as a skeleton, his physical abilities were much worse than they were as a human. But now that he has slain a ton of monsters, he is basically back to how he was before and has all the abilities he had from before he died. He's even able to use divinity despite being an undead. That wasn't expected, but it works out well for him as he uses it to keep the bread he brought good for a few more days in case he ever needs to eat. After that, he gets back to his objective of becoming a ghoul and decides he will keep his plan of killing monsters little by little and moving up in difficulty. Right now, he can handle 1 or 2 fairly easily, but 3 might be a little tough, and if he sees 4 at once, he's going to have to run, but it's not likely that the monsters will move around in such large packs. Even as an undead, Rent is still really weak. He spent 10 years as an adventurer and went nowhere with his career, even though he is able to use spirit, mana, and divinity, which is rare for a person. He is not particularly strong in any of them, so he remained as weak as ever. Deep down, he knew he wasn't cut out to be an adventurer, and most people would probably have quit after a few years of being stuck at the same bronze rank. But he never stopped trying to become a better adventurer. He trained every day and asked his friend to help him study monsters and magic. He even took on all manners of quests, no matter how small they may have been. He had a dream to become a mithril adventurer in his lifetime, a level at the top of the adventuring world, which not even the naturally gifted could easily reach. It is reserved for only the most powerful adventurers, capable of saving a kingdom on their own, and he isn't going to give up on that dream just because he has become a skeleton. He continues going through the dungeon and killing monsters, soon becoming even more powerful than he was as a human. And after killing one more slime, it finally happens. He feels something strange happening to his body as the energy flows into him and all his muscles grow back. He has become a ghoul. He is really excited even if his face isn't able to show the expression. He now has skin again, even if it is dried up and decaying, but if he keeps going at it, he may eventually turn into a vampire, and by that point, he will look exactly like a human and can return to his normal life. But for now, having more than bones means he can talk again, although it is going to take some practice to learn to speak well again. Ever since he evolved into a ghoul, he had regained his muscle back and can now move better than he could while he was a skeleton. Now he can strengthen not only his body but also his sword, and the difference is clear as he is now able to easily defeat 2 goblins in one go. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Rent finds a rookie fighting a skeleton, and the girl just barely manages to beat it. Rent is excited to finally see another human after such a long few days, but he also realizes that he can't carelessly approach her, since she would either try to kill him or just run away. He doesn't recognize her, so he assumes she must be new to this whole adventuring thing since he knows basically every adventurer in the town. Rent continues to follow the girl through the dark dungeon and realizes she is heading in the direction of that dragon cave that killed him. He has to find a way to stop her, but luckily, a skeleton spawns behind her and diverts her attention. She begins to attack, and Rent can tell that she has received good training, but she's pretty weak since she needs to land several hits in a row in order to kill the skeleton. She gets herself backed into a corner and has the skeleton closing in on her. Rent can no longer sit still and watch her embarrass herself, so he steps up to save her before she gets deleted by the skeleton. As he approaches, the skeleton recognizes him as the bigger threat, so it turns around to face him. But Rent is screaming internally at the girl because she has a clear shot to backstab it right there. Take the shot. Realizing she isn't going to be of any help, Rent takes matters into his own rotten flesh-covered hands and one-shots the skeleton. After that is taken care of, Rent tries to approach the girl, but she is understandably freaked out to have a ghoul approached so casually. To try to calm her down, Rent starts saying he doesn't intend to hurt her, while also dropping his sword. He tries to explain to the girl that he is the adventurer Rent, but then she asks why he looks like this now. He explains that he got killed by a dragon, but she just wants to confirm that he isn't going to try and eat her or anything. Rent swears that he has no intention of doing so, but he asks that she help him out with something if she's willing. He wants her to buy him some clothes because he would like to go back to the town, something like a robe so he can hide his body. He gives her his pouch of money and tells her she can keep the rest if she buys him the clothes that he is asking for. The girl now understands that Rent truly isn't trying to hurt her, so she introduces herself as Rena and swears that she will repay him for his help saving her from that skeleton. However, she still keeps her sword pointed towards him the entire time as she leaves. Rent doesn't really like how cautious she is being around him, but that is probably how an adventurer should act in a situation like this. Come to think of it, a proper adventurer would also probably just report a situation like this to the Adventurers Guild rather than actually help him, but he doesn't think Rena would betray him. As Rena returns to town, she immediately goes back to the guild receptionist who had been worried sick about her since she didn't come back from the dungeon on time. Rena says she is fine, but a lot of stuff happened, so she would like to ask about some. Later on in the labyrinth, Rent is fighting a slime and can tell that he is much stronger than he was as a human. He is much more powerful and can use his body to its full potential now more than he ever could. Now, if only his face did look like a wrinkled nutsack. From the dungeon entrance, Rent hears Rena calling out to him, and he is honestly surprised that she actually came back for him. As he approaches her, she notices him and immediately draws her sword out of fear because she isn't sure that he is the same ghoul she met earlier, but after Rent confirms that it is actually him, and he seems to have gotten himself past preschool levels of talking after a lot of practice so Rena can understand him better. Back on topic, she tells him that she has brought the clothes he asked for, as well as his change, which she goes to set down beside the bag, but Rent gets a little too close, so she starts backing away in fear again. But she apologizes and tells him that she is a little scared of him, but she will eventually get used to it, so he shouldn't feel bad. Rent tells her it's fine and goes to look through the clothes that she brought for him, and it is absolutely perfect. Rena even went the extra mile and bought him a pair of boots and gloves to hide the rest of his body. She's so considerate that it's enough to make a grown man cry, but not Rent, because he still doesn't have tear ducts. Rent tries on the clothes and he looks cool as heck with that outfit. He loses some visibility, but that is the price you have to pay for looking so cool, although there is still the problem of his nutsack face, so he needs to do something about it before he can return to town. Rena had thought of this as well and bought a mask for Rent to hide his face, but as he tries it on, it gets sucked into his face and he can't seem to pull it off. This mask clearly has Curse of Binding on it, so Rena apologizes for bringing it to him. Now that she really thinks about it, she should have known better than to trust it back Allie's stall. It was also pretty suspicious that the mask was so cheap, but she was blinded by the Black Friday savings. She apologizes again, but she did check the item for a curse before bringing it here and didn't react, so it must be a curse that only activates when it is put on. If it is a curse, then maybe Rent can dispel it with the divinity he has. Rena is surprised that he can use divinity even as an undead monster, but the power he has wasn't enough for him to get rid of the curse. It doesn't look like he will be able to take off the mask anytime soon, but it doesn't really matter since he needed to hide his face anyway. Now that Rent looks less undead, Rena suggests that they can return to town together, so they both get on a carriage to ride to Malt. On the way there, Rena tells Rent that she registered to become an adventurer in the capital, but there were too many skilled adventurers there, so she was forced to leave due to the skill gap. She came out Malt because it was much more newbie-friendly than most towns. Plus, it had 2 labyrinths nearby, so that was an added bonus. Red agrees that coming to Malt was a good decision for her to make, but he is surprised that she was willing to come all the way out to the countryside despite being a city kid. They get to the town gate, but Ren is hesitant to go through since almost everyone here knows him, so they'll be able to tell that something is wrong if he shows them his ID. If that's the case, then she suggests that they go to the west gate since that one normally isn't used as much. They get to the west gate and are asked to present their identification to enter. They do so and are allowed passage, but the guards take issue with Ren's cool but emo outfit and start hassling him to show his face. Rena comes up with a story on the spot and tells the guards that Rent was badly injured in the dungeon, so bought a mask to hide his scars. However, the mask turned out to be cursed, so he can't take it off now. Rent even offers to let them try to take the mask off if they don't believe him, so after confirming that it is cursed, they feel kind of bad for hassling an injured man and let him go through. Once inside the town, Rena is excited to go around and do things with Rent, but just like that, he went to get the milk and disappeared. From a nearby rooftop, Brent watches Rena, and he can tell that she's going to become a great adventurer, so when he looks a bit more human, he will come back and apologize to her. For now, he has to go find his friend so she can help him figure things out, so that night, Rent shows up to Lorraine's house and finds her sleeping on the couch. Even while sleepy, she can tell it is Rent from the way he acts, but there is definitely something wrong here. So she decided to play a little prank and act like she was sleeping, but after seeing what happened to him, it's a little too late to say it's just a prank, bro. Lorraine has studied monsters all her life, but she has never heard anything about someone getting eaten by a dragon and turned into an undead after they get shit out. Coming from anyone else, she wouldn't believe a single word that was just said, but since it is coming from Rent and he currently looks like one of the malnourished children that Nestle uses for labor, she's inclined to accept his statements as fact. Ren appreciates that Lorraine isn't freaking out over his new look and is just thinking about it calmly, but it does feel like she thinks of him slightly more as a test subject than a friend. After pondering for a bit, she turns to Ren and asks if he really is the same person. And that's a fair question, since even though he still has his memories and thinks the same, there is no guarantee that he is actually the same. For now, though, he acts normal enough for Lorraine to trust him, so she asks what he intends to do from here on out. Brett tells her that he wants to keep being an adventurer since while he may have died already, his dream of becoming a mithril adventurer lives on. However, he can't show up to the Adventurers Guild looking like this, so to continue adventuring, he needs Lorraine to accept quests for him, plus, he would need somewhere to stay since he can't go back to his inn either, so Lorraine offers her home to him. In exchange, all she asks is that he helps her with his research. Rhett knows exactly what that means when he is dealing with Lorraine, so he makes it clear that she isn't allowed to dissect him or anything. She tells him that there is no need to worry since she never intended to do that in the first place, though she may take a bit of his flesh for science. Later that day, Ren is doing some cleaning to help out when Lorraine comes back with some money in hand. He had asked her to help him sell the items he collected while he was in the dungeon, but she decided to just pay him for it directly, since this way she won't have to pay the guild's fees. Isn't tax evasion great? Ren thanks her for the help, and now that he has some money to use, he announces that he will be going to the blacksmith to get a new sword. Rent walks through the streets, happy to be able to move around freely again, but he is still subject to the judging stares of the people that find his look to be terrifying. He pulls his hood down and just keeps moving until he gets to the blacksmith, but the receptionist lady there is also frightened by him. He apologizes for looking so unsightly, and the lady realizes that she is being really rude, so she ignores how he looks and asks what he would like her to do for him. Rent tells her that he wants to have his sword repaired, so the lady takes a look at it, and from the damage it has taken, she can tell that he knows how to handle a sword well. It looks like he can also use spirit too, which Rent confirms, adding that he can use mana and divinity as well. The lady is surprised, as it is really rare for anyone to be able to use all three. In fact, there's so only one other person whom she has ever seen who is able to use all three, which coincidentally is also Rent. He asks her not to make a big deal out of it since he would like to avoid too much attention, so the lady promises not to speak a word about it to anyone else. Rent pulls out the money Lorraine paid him and asks if this will be enough to have a new sword made for him. So the lady takes a look and says it should do the job, but is going to take some time for it to be finished since their blacksmith is very thorough in his work. Rent says he is fine with the wait time, so whenever the sword is ready, they should contact Lorraine to get a hold of him. Meanwhile, Lorraine is reading up on the information that is available about ghouls. They are lower-class undead monsters, and there have been cases reported where a powerful monster was able to turn people into undead, but in those cases, the people seem to have lost all personality and human emotion with their transformation. However, that clearly isn't the case with Rent right now. She knows that something about him must have changed. He still feels like the same old Rent she knew. We get a flashback to when Lorraine was younger and Rent was just a newbie adventurer, and as she took out a quest which required a bit of traveling, a man called out to her and asked that she takes Rent along with her so he can gain some experience as an adventurer. Thus, they went out into the forest where Lorraine began searching for some herbs. She was having trouble finding them, so she started thinking that the information she had been given may have been wrong. The world was a really boring place for her at the time since she was just too good at life. She became the youngest person to ever receive the title of Great Doctor, but she didn't care about her achievement, was starting to get tired of being surrounded by adults all the time. Great Doctors get the perk of being able to sign up as adventurers and start at silver rank, so for no other reason than she was bored, Lorraine decided that she would go out and become an adventurer. She finally spotted one of the plants she needed and excitedly began to harvest it. Afterwards, she calls Rent over so she can put her harvest in the bag, but then she sees that Rent beat her out by at least 10 times in plant gathering. She is about to ask him to tell her how he managed this, but Rent cuts her off because he notices something is off. There is a goblin currently staring them down, and it is about to fire an arrow, so Rent tells for Lorraine to use a fire spell to take it down before it can do any damage to them. Lorraine does as he says, and a huge fireball is launched, destroying the goblin and somehow not starting a forest fire in the process. Lorraine is shaken by the experience but tries to play it off by saying she has been in many situations like this before, although she had several people guarding her back then. That is when she realized that Rent wasn't sent with her as training, but rather because the people at the guild were worried that she wouldn't be able to handle herself if things got dangerous. However, Rent is still a new adventurer, so she wonders how he could be so knowledgeable, so Rent recounts what he was told. If you want to become a good adventurer, then you need to learn to read and write, as well as learn about plants and monsters and anything else possible. And just like that, Lorraine was raised up. She asks Rent if he could teach her everything he knows about adventuring from then on, and since then, she's been by Rent's side as he tries to become a mithril adventurer. Meanwhile, Rent has finalized the details of the sword he once made, so he says goodbye to the blacksmith and the receptionist. Before he goes, he is handed a replacement sword for him to use while his main one is being made. As he leaves, the blacksmith and receptionist talk to each other, and it seems they realize that the guy they were talking to had to be Rent. After all, there aren't many people who can use all three attributes and also have a close relationship with Lorraine, but he is clearly in a bit of trouble. They think he has been cursed, but don't understand why he didn't try to come to them for help and instead kept his identity a secret. The blacksmith thinks that it may not be that he doesn't trust them, but he just isn't the kind of person to cause trouble for others even if he needs help. For now, though, it seems like he will keep coming to their shop, so they'll get another chance to see him again. That evening, Rent made dinner for Lorraine, but while she greatly enjoyed the meal, Rent wasn't able to enjoy it since ghouls don't get hungry at all. This brings up the topic Lorraine wanted to discuss. She spent all day combing through every book she had on his situation, but there isn't much info available. All she can tell is that Rent's case is special, which is probably why he is able to evolve in the first place. She asks what he plans to evolve into next, but he has no idea what it is going to be. All he wants is to look as human as possible so he can live like he used to. So to do that, he is going to need to head back into the labyrinth and defeat more monsters. In the labyrinth, there is a man fighting a slime, and it is very clear that he has no idea what he is doing as he is about to get himself dissolved. However, Rent happened to be passing by and saved the guy from certain doom, and immediately after he starts walking off. In the labyrinth, it is an adventurer's responsibility to make sure they come back alive, so you are not obligated to help others if they are in danger. There are even some ill-intentioned individuals who would pretend to be hurt just to lure you into a trap and rob you. The man catches up to Rent and asks that he let him join him while he goes through the labyrinth. As you can probably tell by now, this guy is new to adventuring and can't take down a slime, but he is a chef in malt and is currently drowning in debt, so he needs to find a way to pay back 15 gold by next week. He turned to adventuring to make some quick cash, but most parties rejected him because he was inexperienced. So he just needs Rent to give him a chance, and he promises that he will do everything within his power to make himself useful. Rent tells the man that he is busy, and besides, this dungeon has already been explored so much that your chances of finding anything valuable are incredibly low. Rent suddenly realizes that there might be a way to help this guy make the money he needs, so he decides to let him tag along and shows him the way to the new room in the dungeon where he died. The guy thinks he can make a fortune just by giving this information to the guild, but he knows Rent is the one who actually found it, so he can't take credit for it. Rent tells him that it's fine for him to take the credit since he needs the money anyway, but he wants the man to stick around with him while he keeps exploring the hidden passage. They come up on a hidden passage, and Rent has the experience to know that you never trust an empty room in a labyrinth, but the man has no such sense. He steps straight into a teleportation circle and gets sent off to who knows where instantly. Now the smart thing to do would be for Rent to ditch the guy and act like he never met him, but he wouldn't be the MC if he did that, so he follows through the circle and finds the man laid out on the floor and a giant skeleton monster staring him down. Rent looks over to the unconscious man and realizes that he needs to act fast if he wants there to be any hope of him surviving. However, as he tries to bring the skeleton down by striking at its leg, he is unable to do any damage to its bones. If spirit energy isn't able to damage it, Rent decides to use his magic energy instead, but that is ineffective as well. Looking at his situation, the exit to the room has disappeared, so he is likely currently fighting the boss. And if that is the case, then he won't be able to escape until he has defeated it. Terrible luck considering he didn't want to deal with this, but since it is an undead skeleton, he should be able to damage it if he uses divinity. He's not sure if his sword will be able to hold up against his strikes, but he uses divinity and slashes at the skeleton's leg, this time severing it completely and forcing it down to the ground. And with the skeleton grounded, Rent leaps on top of it before splitting its skull in two. After the fight is over, the man wakes up to find Rent healing him. All he remembers is being attacked by a huge skeleton and being knocked out, but doesn't look like he needs to worry about the skeleton anymore since it's laid out in pieces on the floor over there. He is amazed that Rent was able to take down a monster of that size, and when he is shown the size of the crystal that came from it, he is even more impressed. Rent offers to let him just have the mana crystal so he can pay off his debt, but under some conditions, of course. The man doesn't know how he could possibly be of any use to a powerful adventurer like Rent, so he shows the man his arm and tells him that since he looks like this because a monster got to him, he can't go into the guild or regular shops without scaring the people, so he would like him to do those things for him. The man doesn't think it is fair to Rent for him to give up this valuable gem in exchange for some errands, so Rent adds another condition that he is allowed to eat for free at his restaurant when he gets it back up and running. The man breaks down in tears from the kindness Rent has shown him in both saving his life and giving him the means to get his restaurant back. Rent tells him to get up so they can leave the labyrinth, but the man doesn't know how they are meant to get out of here since there is no door present. It seems that regular people can't see it, but a magic teleportation circle is clearly visible to Rent from where he is standing. Even though he doesn't see anything there, the man trusts Rent's word and goes over to the teleportation circle, leaving Rent behind in the room. Rent would like to go on ahead in the labyrinth, but with how much has happened today, it's going to have to be another time. The man takes Rent to his restaurant where his wife, Isabella, had been anxiously awaiting his return. She was so worried he would end up dead in the dungeon, and he nearly did, but luckily Rent was there to bail him out. He tells his wife the great news that Rent offered him this huge magic gem to clear their debt, but his wife is skeptical because there's no such thing as free money. As hard as it may be to believe, Rent was actually generous enough to help him out in his time of need, but it's not completely free as the man now has to help Rent out when he needs it. His wife worries some more that he might end up doing some dangerous stuff, but he assures her that Rent only needs him to run errands for him. He was also promised unlimited free food at the restaurant, but even that doesn't compare to the value of the gem Rent has given them. They are happy to finally be able to get their life back on track without having to sell their kidneys, but first, they both sincerely thank Rent for all he has done for them. The man introduces himself as Loris and asks for the name of his savior. So Rent introduces himself properly but asks that Loris keep his name a secret. Loris swears to never tell anyone and thanks Rent once more as he leaves, but something is not right with Rent right now. As he was walking down an alleyway, he thinks to himself that he was hoping Loris would turn out to be a criminal or something, so it wouldn't have mattered if he died in the dungeon or not. His mind is growing cloudy and he isn't able to think clearly anymore, so with Lorraine's house in sight, he walks in. Lorraine is oblivious to the shift in Rent's personality, so when he suddenly hugs her, she thinks he has finally caught on to the hints she's been dropping. If only this had happened while he still had his wiener. Unfortunately, while Rent was definitely making an advance, it wasn't the kind she would have hoped for as while hugging her. Rent's mask changes form to free his mouth, and he takes a huge bite out of her neck. This is when she realizes that Rent might not be in his right mind, so she calls out to him to find out if his consciousness is still in there somewhere. Rent reacts, so she's at least reassured that he is still human, but with his current state, she is forced to use magic to blast him. Just enough to incapacitate, but not kill him, as she wants to hear what happened from him later. She isn't upset about what he did, but if he's going to do that, at least come into her while still sane. Rent wakes up a while later and has a terrible headache. Lorraine is sitting across from him and asks if he still has the urge to devour her. Rent has regained his sanity, so he no longer craves Lorraine's juicy flesh, and now that that has been cleared up, she begins asking him what he remembers of the incident. Rent recognized this strange urge back with Loris when he found himself wishing Loris was someone he could kill so he could eat him. But after he turned out to be a good person, Rent came back here and Lorraine suddenly looked so delicious so he couldn't help himself. He apologizes for what he has done, and Lorraine doesn't hold it against him because she knows he didn't do it of his own volition. Lorraine had figured something like this might happen since ghouls prefer to eat the flesh of humans, but more importantly, she asks if Rent's body is okay, since she did use a lot of power to knock him out, but Rent says he is doing alright. Even if he says he is fine, Lorraine suggests that he get some rest so he can heal, and she'll do the same in the next room over. Before she goes, Rent stops her and asks to see the wound he inflicted on her. Lorraine complies with his request, so Rent uses his divinity to begin healing her wound. Lorraine is surprised by the amount of divinity Rent is able to use, but this should be enough to heal a wound like this, so by the time Rent is done, there are nothing but some faint bite marks on her shoulder. This still isn't good enough for Rent, so he pours more divinity into the wound until it completely disappears. Since the wound is fine, she can't use it as a reason Rent needs to marry her now, but now that she thinks about it, the way he looks has changed quite a lot. His body looks almost human now, so he might really be able to pass this off as an injury that he got. He checks himself in the mirror and realizes that his mask changed form, so now his awful lit game is on full display. This is terrible for him since he needs to keep that hidden, but as he thinks this, the mask changes form to cover his atrocious lips but leaves his eyes uncovered. This means he is able to control the mask to some extent with his desires, but when he tries to get the mask to come off, he doesn't budge even slightly. For now, this isn't too bad since he does still look like an undead, so he would still need to keep the mask on anyway. As he changes its form to cover his mouth, Lorraine points out that he is able to speak much clearer than he could a moment ago, so he comes to the conclusion that he must have evolved again. But why did that happen now if he defeated the skeleton boss while he was still in the dungeon? Lorraine hypothesizes that it could have been because he ate her flesh, but she still isn't sure of it herself. Right now, he looks a lot like a ghast, but not the floating fireball blaster. Kind that serves under a vampire, but there is still no explanation for why a ghast was his next form. Even among the world's top academics, evolution remains a mystery, but she has got a hypothesis regarding the matter. The two sit down to talk, and Lorraine begins by saying Rent was a skeleton at first, but then he evolved into a ghoul. But the very fact that he evolved into a ghoul is strange in and of itself. If evolution was just a monster becoming a more powerful version of itself, then why didn't he go from a skeleton to a skeleton knight or something? Sure, there are cases where skeletons have turned into ghouls before, but in Rent's case, I think it is safe to infer that when evolving, you take the form of whatever monster you want to be. That is certainly plausible since Rent wanted to look more human like a vampire and he is on that tech tree now. But if that's the case, then why didn't he just go straight up to being a vampire since he really wanted to? It was probably due to him not being high enough in level to get to a vampire. There are no guarantees of returning to being a human, but it is certain that if he intends to become a vampire, then defeating powerful monsters may not be enough anymore. There are still a lot of things they don't know about the evolution, but they'll cross that bridge when they get to it. But with that out of the way, there are some experiments that Lorraine would like to try out on Rent since he is transformed, so she asks him to take off all his clothes as with him having more meat on his bones, he may have gotten his other meat back as well. She's going to look over every inch of his body and also wants some flesh samples, but she knows Rent must already be pretty tired from all that happened today, so she decides to let him rest for the day. The next day, as Lorraine is still in bed while Rent is out training, his flesh-eating impulse is gone and he feels perfectly fine, but his sword is in no shape for him to use it in a fight. He goes back to the blacksmith and the guy certainly isn't pleased with the condition of the lone sword. Rent apologizes and explains to Cloak that he ran into a giant skeleton and was forced to use divinity on the sword to defeat the monster. That explains why the sword is so damaged, but there shouldn't be any monsters in that labyrinth that require the use of divinity. So Rent then explains that he found a hidden area in the labyrinth, and Cloak assumes that's why he looks like this now. In any case, Rent would like a sword so he can go explore that labyrinth hidden room again. So to accommodate him, Cloak gives him a better sword, but also reveals that he knows it is Rent under that mask. As Rent leaves, you can't believe he was found out by Cloak, but at least he got a new sword to use in the dungeon. This should help him get his next evolution. Later, Rent is down in Lorraine's lab and he promised to help her with her experiments, but he's starting to have second thoughts about this now that he sees the concoction she was cooking up. She had Rent drink the poison and it tasted terrible, but that was all. It has no negative side effects on him whatsoever thanks to his undead nature. Yet he is still able to use healing potions and herbs, so he definitely doesn't follow the normal rules of being undead. By this point, Lorraine has gotten really sleepy from all the experiments she has performed on Rent, which prompts her to ask if he still feels the need to sleep even when he is aghast. He answers that he barely needs any sleep at all. However, when it comes to his appetite, although he doesn't like to admit it, he has a slight desire to drink human blood. Lorraine had expected as much and offers Rent a vial containing a mystery liquid. He hesitantly takes it, but as he opens the bottle and takes a sniff, he finds that the liquid is human blood. Lorraine assures him that it is her own blood, so while he may be hesitant to consume human blood, he needs to take a little every once in a while to keep himself from losing control and attacking random people like he did last time. Rent accepts her kindness and then puts a drop of blood on his finger so he can taste the blood, and it is delicious. For now, all he needs to keep himself in check is one drop, so he will make sure this vial will last for a long time. He tells her that he will be heading out soon, so she should get some rest while he is gone. He plans to head into the labyrinth, but first, since he has a more human-looking body, he thinks he might be able to go to the guild in person this time. Lorraine can immediately tell that it is going to be a bad idea, since if he wants to take on a job there, he will have to bring out his adventurer card, and there will be an uproar if everyone finds out this is what he looks like now. He doesn't see what the big deal is since he was just a regular old bronze adventurer, but Lorraine points out that the guild really liked him. He would always help out by guiding new adventurers and taking on the jobs that no one else wanted to do. There were even meetings about bringing Rent into work for the guild. He had no idea that they valued him so much even though he's not even a high-ranked adventurer, but they really did want to hire him. They just wanted to wait for him to retire from adventuring first. Rent has no plans to ever retire from the guild, which is what Lorraine had expected, but there is still the problem of him taking on quests. If he ever wants to get to Mithril, he is going to have to prove himself to rank up. But in order to do that, he has to take the quests personally. And since he can't show up there as Rent without causing a fuss, Lorraine suggests that he go in and register as a new person. Rent takes her advice, so later that day, he walks into the guild for the first time since he dies, and he is glad to see this familiar building. He spots Sheila over at the front desk and walks over to register as a new adventurer. Sheila tells him that there is paperwork that he needs to fill out, but if he would like, she can help with that. Rent tells her it's fine since he is able to read and write by himself. The last time Rent filled out this form was over 10 years ago now. As he finishes filling out the form, Sheila is surprised to see that he put his name down as Rent Vivier. She says another adventurer who was also called Rent went missing a while ago. Rent is glad to see that she was worried about someone like him, but to throw her off his trail, he asks if she is talking about a guy called Rent Faina. Sheila asks how he could have known that, so he tells her that he is a relative of Lorraine and she informed him of the situation. Sheila is disappointed because lately there were rumors of a strange man going and coming from Lorraine's house. She was hoping it was the Rent whom she had known, but it seems like she was mistaken. Sheila heads off into the back to finish his paperwork, and while she is gone, Rent thinks to himself that it was a good thing he said he was Lorraine's relative. He wouldn't want to have people mistakenly think she had a lover or something. Sheila returns to Rent after completing his registration and tells him that he is now an Iron-class adventurer, but she gives him a warning not to get himself killed. Rent later heads into the dungeon and this time he hears a fight happening off in the distance. The voices sound like those of some kids, so he goes to take a look and finds a swordsman and a healer fighting a goblin. They are probably new adventurers, but they seem to be working well enough together, so he decides to leave them alone. For now, he has to hurry and explore that hidden room before any of the other adventurers here find it. He returns to the teleportation circle and steps in, finding himself teleported to a creepy bedroom. He looks around a little and finds a skeleton on the bed, but this is just a regular skeleton. This means that there was someone living in this dungeon at some point, but before he can take a closer look, a woman appears from behind him and asks him to state his intentions for being here. He can already tell that she is bad news, so Rent tries to defuse the situation by telling her that he is an adventurer and just came to search this place. However, that does nothing to calm the woman down, since if he is an adventurer, then that means he came here looking for something to steal. She doesn't want this place to be disturbed, so she raises her hand to fire a magic blast at Rent, and although he tried to use spirit to block, it still blew him back against a wall. His shirt was destroyed in the process, revealing his gassed body. The woman sees this and seems to understand what happened, so she apologizes to him for the misunderstanding. The woman knows Rent must be upset right now because she just burned off his clothes and also tried to kill him, so to make up for it, she offers him her coat in exchange, revealing that she's got barely any clothes underneath. She doesn't seem too bothered by her lack of clothing and tells Rent that her cloak is nice and more valuable than the clothes he was wearing before, so that this shouldn't be enough. Rent is just glad that she no longer wants to kill him, so he takes the cloak. The woman explains to him that this place is really special to her, so she would greatly appreciate if Rent would be kind enough to keep this place a secret for her sake. This means she doesn't want him to report to the guild about the hidden room, but it's not like telling the guild would actually be terrible for her, since no one can enter this place unless Rent comes in with them. Since he is still an adventurer, the woman doesn't want to send him back empty-handed, so she offers him an acacia map instead. The map is a magic item that will automatically record the spaces which its owner has traveled through. With this, the woman says they are even and proceeds to teleport Rent out of the dungeon. He wakes up at the dungeon entrance and goes to see Lorraine to explain everything that just happened to him. At this point, she thinks Rent might be cursed with how many life-threatening situations he gets put in every day. In any case, after taking a look at the magic map, Lorraine can say with certainty that it is not cursed, so it is alright for Rent to use it if he wants to. He asks if she knows how to use it, but when she tries, it doesn't react to her magic at all. She asks Rent to give it a shot, so he applies his magic and the map begins to record the entirety of the labyrinth he usually goes to. This is amazing by itself, but it also shows the names and locations of people who are currently in the labyrinth. This puts this map at the level of a national treasure, and it can also show layouts of other dungeons as well, but only the paths that Rent has used. Since the map turned out to be so great, Rent asks Lorraine to take a look at the cloak he got, and after a brief look, she can confirm that it is of really high quality. The cloak has very high magic resistance imbued in it, and it is so strong that a blade wouldn't be able to pierce through it. Rent is starting to think he got a really good deal with the trade from the woman, but there is still the question of who this woman who tried to kill him truly is. He doesn't have much to go off of, but he knows that she was really strong, at least stronger than a gold-class adventurer. This intrigues Lorraine further, as it means there is someone out there who has the ability to make a living space within the labyrinth. Rent says he is going to go back into the labyrinth tomorrow, but she doesn't think that is a good idea, especially since he nearly got killed today. The way Rent sees it, his going back should be fine since the woman just told him not to tell the guild about this place, not that he could never come back. As Rent enters the dungeon the next day, he thinks about what Lorraine said about him being cursed. It may be true, as he accidentally found a hidden area and encountered one of the most powerful beings in the world immediately. He became undead and then got a curse mask by accident, but he doesn't view himself as unlucky or anything. Thanks to all that happened, he has been able to fight powerful enemies and get stronger than he ever could have gotten as a human. He heads back to that hidden area, but this time the entrance has been sealed up completely. He checks his map to make sure he isn't mistaken about the location, but when he looks at the map, it no longer shows anything behind the wall. This must mean the woman doesn't want him to come back here right now. Back at the guild, people are still asking about the situation with Rent Faina, who is still missing, and they are trying to remain hopeful, but saying he may have taken on a long escort mission, but by now is starting to look like he is gone for good. Just then, Rent appears behind her and gives her a jump scare. He wants to take on a quest and shows it to Sheila. The quest is one which involves fighting 3 orcs at once, so Sheila thinks it may be a bit too difficult for Rent since he just recently joined the guild. However, he assures her that he is up for the task since he is strong enough to defeat orcs by himself. Thus, Sheila entrusts him with a quest, adding that he shouldn't do anything too risky since his life should always be more important, and Rent understands that better than anyone, having already lost 1 life. A little while later, Rent returns with the required materials after defeating 3 orcs, and Sheila is honestly surprised that he managed to pull it off. To prove that he actually accomplished the task, Rent takes out his magic bag and shows Sheila the 3 pieces of orc meat which he had acquired, and they are well preserved as well, so Sheila is sure the client will be happy with the results. Although she asks Rent to wait a moment while she goes to do something in the back. While Rent is waiting, the other adventurers in the guild are starting to murmur about him since he apparently took down 3 orcs by himself despite being a newbie. Sheila soon returns with a scroll in hand and suggests that Rent could take the promotion exam for bronze class adventurers. It is rare to offer the exam to an adventurer who literally started a day ago, but she thinks he has potential, so it shouldn't be a problem. That evening, Rent is talking to Lorraine, and she is impressed that he got offered the promotion so soon after joining as a new adventurer, but it makes sense considering the level of strength he possesses right now. Mainly thanks to the undead body he has, but it still counts as his strength. By the way, she forgot to ask which name Rent chose to register with, so he informs her that he named himself Rent Vivi. Lorraine nearly chokes on her tea after learning that he chose her last name and asks why he would do that since everyone already knew she was close with Rent Fauna. He just didn't want people to start thinking Lorraine was having a random man stay over at her place, so he chose to have people think he's a relative of hers. And Lorraine understands his reasoning behind what he did, but she also doesn't care about her reputation as much as he thinks she does. The next day, Rent goes in for the promotion exam, but Sheila is surprised to see him here as she thought he would opt to wait for the next one so he would have time to study for it. But the next one is several months away, and he doesn't want to wait that long, so he chose to do this one. The exam begins, and they are all informed that they will be tested on the guild's rules and the proper way to handle monster drops, so only those that pass this test will be allowed to move on to the practical exam. Now that everyone is informed, the instructor tells everyone who wants to take the written exam to follow him. They are all seated in a class, and Rent realizes that there are way more people than he thought there would be. There are also some familiar faces taking the test, but while it is pretty hard for a regular person to be able to read and write, he had learned a whole lot of things while he was still in his village, so this test is going to be easy, especially since it is his second time taking it. After the test, a lot of adventurers are beating themselves up for failing, but Rent managed to get perfect score on the test, so he asks what he will be required to do for the practical exam. Sheila informs him that he will be required to form a party with a few other examinees and complete a job for the guild, so she introduces him to Laura and Rise. Rise doesn't seem to like him a whole lot, but he introduces himself as a swordsman who can use spirit to raise his physical strength. Next is Laura, who introduces herself as a mage who can also use healing magic. The test is about to begin, so the instructor gets everyone's attention and informs them that they are going to be heading into the labyrinth of the new moon, and after he hands them their maps, their job will be to reach the point marked on the map. There are no restrictions in particular, and everyone is meant to head to the same spot, so this is more of a race to the finish line. The adventurers make their way to the labyrinth of the new moon, and Rise is feeling confident since he has been in this one before, although only on the first floor. Before they can rush in, Rent stops both Rise and Laura, telling them that they may need to buy a new map. The one the guild provided them with is over 15 years old, so they won't be able to trust anything that is written in it. Rent heads over to a nearby stall and asks to purchase a map, so the stall owner, thinking he's got a couple of suckers over here, tries to sell them the map for 2 silver coins, and even I can that's a rip-off and I don't understand the currency. Before Rise and Laura can get scammed, Rent speaks up and says a map of the first floor should only cost them 5 bronze pieces. Seeing as Rent is aware of the actual price, the merchant agrees to take the bronze. Now in comparing the new map to the old one, there is a world of difference between the two, as the new one is far more up to date than the one they were given. The merchant gives the kids some advice and tells them to listen to what Rent has to say because he clearly knows his stuff. Rise agrees, but he still doesn't understand why the guild would give them outdated maps. Rent points out that the carriage that brought them here could have just as easily taken them somewhere else just because. So as an adventurer, you should never let your guard down too much, lest you fall victim to little tricks like this. The group soon makes their way into the dungeon and come across a horde of skeletons which they now have to engage in battle. Rent reminds Rise to keep his guard up at all times as he goes into battle, and with the help of Laura, they defeat a lot of skeletons fairly easily. Rent is impressed with how capable they are considering their age and have their teamwork down to a science. But there's still a bit of work to be done in individual capabilities as Rise gets his sword caught by one of the skeletons and ends up needing to be saved by Rent. He is thankful for the help, but there weren't this many monsters here last time he was in the labyrinth. He is right, and Rent knows what is causing it as he finds a pouch of incense on the ground. These things can easily attract monsters to an area, but Rise doesn't get why they are here. Rent gets the attention of the two and explains that there is going to be an ambush up ahead, and it's not going to be monsters this time, so they must be ready to fight humans. Around the corner, Rent gets into position to counter the sneak attack and successfully blocks a sword strike from this bald dude. There are 2 others coming to attack, so Rent leaves the bald guys for Rise to handle while he goes after the archer and mage. The archer tries to fire an arrow at him, but Ren is able to dodge and get in close to take him out. And immediately after, he deals with the mage and destroys his staff. Meanwhile, Rise is still struggling against the swordsman who is stronger than him, so he needs Laura's help to blind him while he goes back in for round 2. It looks like Rent won't need to intervene in this one, and they eventually manage to take the guy down by working together. And after tying them up, they find out that these guys are taking the promotion exam as well. The instructor did say that anything was allowed, so this technically doesn't break any rules. But it loops back to Rent's initial point that anything can happen in the labyrinth, so they can never let their guards down as adventurers. They've only managed to make it this far thanks to Rent's help, so Rise swallows his pride and promises that he will follow Rent's orders from now on. They move forward, and Rent tells the guy that has been watching them not to leave his friends tied up for too long. These guys are actually sent by the guild, but there should have been no way for a new adventurer to know anything about this, so the guy who was hiding is beginning to have his suspicions of Rent. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Sheila gets called in by the guild master because there have been rumors going around about Rent Vivi. Although he hasn't really done anything, the other adventurers are saying he may be a criminal with how skilled he is and no one knowing anything about his past. That isn't really grounds to take any action against him, but they can't ignore accusations like this, so he wants Sheila to keep an eye on him. Rent and the others make it to the entrance of the dungeon boss room, and Rise is pretty hesitant to go through with a boss battle, but this is the only way to reach the goal. Rent tells him there is no shame in backing out of a fight which you aren't sure you can win, but then moments later, another party approaches and starts arguing with him over wanting to go ahead first. Rent thinks this is a great opportunity, so as the other adventurers start picking a fight with them and make Laura uncomfortable, Rent points his sword at the leader of the opposing party and makes it clear he could hack them down to pieces in half a second if he wanted to. The other party leader backtracks and says he was just joking, but despite their rudeness, Rent still lets them go ahead first. The other party thinks he is dumb for letting them go ahead, and Rise doesn't get why he would allow them to take the first fight when they got here first, but Laura is sure that Rent has his reasons for doing so. And moments later, a scream is heard from inside the boss room, and those adventurers have to be carried out because they have been badly injured. Rent was sure they would lose the fight, but the guild had stationed employees nearby to get you to safety even if you lose, so the Rise has nothing to fear for this battle. However, Rise never had any intention of running away, since even though he is scared, if he runs away here, then he would never be able to call himself an adventurer again. So he will continue to press on alongside Laura. And now that he has made his decision, they all enter the dungeon together to face the boss. As they enter the dungeon boss room, they come face to face with the Grand Slime, but Rise is confident that they won't lose against something like this the same way those other guys did. If anything, they will be able to report that they defeated it after the other group failed to do so. Red is glad to see that they are enthusiastic about the fight, but in truth, there is no reason for them to want to defeat the monster. The rules never said you needed to be the one to clear the boss room. It just said you needed to get to the location that was past the boss room, so things would have been much easier if the other group managed to kill the slime. However, this is a good lesson in the fact that life won't always give you the easiest way to achieve your goals, so you should always be ready to work for it. Rise charges at the Grand Slime while dodging the incoming attacks, but as he gets closer, the slime changes its shape for one last powerful attack. However, Rise was already expecting this, so he jumps up and aims to strike the slime core with his sword. Unfortunately, the slime is too thick to be pierced by him, so he ends up being pushed back. Laura begins to get a spell ready to assist him while Rent watches their battle. He gives Laura some advice on gathering her mana, but he doesn't want to get directly involved because he is sure that with the abilities they possess, they should have a good chance of winning against the slime. Before they came in here, Ren informed the two of them that most physical attacks are completely ineffective against a Grand Slime, so they are going to need to use magic to finish it off. He asked Laura if she knew any powerful fire spells they could use, and she just so happened to have the perfect spell in mind, but it has a really long cast time, so she would be defenseless while she prepares it. Ren says it's fine since he will be there to handle the slime's attacks while she's casting, but Rise interjected and asked to be the one who was tasked with handling the slime. This is why Ren is leaving it all up to him, but as he was starting to get pushed around by the slime, Laura asks him to go help Rise since he is struggling a little. Rent jumps in to save him from getting dissolved, and with the extra assistance, Rise is able to regain his footing, so the two of them successfully keep the slime busy and buy time for Laura to finish her spell. Once the spell is complete, she warns the others to back away as she fires the large flame arrow at the slime, creating a huge blast wave and burning it until its body liquefies from the damage. Laura is glad they managed to beat it, but it's not over yet as the slime would still be able to regenerate if they leave it as it is, So he tells Rise to finish it off by destroying its core. And once that is finally done, they have successfully defeated the Grand Slime. Before they start celebrating, Rent pulls out some vials and tells the others that they should take a little break to gather the slime fluids, as it is worth a decent amount of money. So they decide to go along with it and spend a few minutes gathering the slime fluid. Unfortunately, while they gather the slime jizz, some other adventurers run past them to try to take the first spot, and Rise is upset because this could mean they lose the first place prize. However, Rent says it's fine, they want to try and get ahead, but they won't be making it far. Moments later, his point is proven as the guys that ran past them are all knocked out by a sleeping gas trap that was set by the guild to catch them off guard. Adventurers often let their guard down when they think they are close to their goal, so this is another lesson to always remain cautious. Besides, even if those guys had made it to the finish first, it wouldn't have made much of a difference, since this was never a race to begin with. The instructor did say that they needed to make it to the goal, and the way he announced it was meant to insinuate that they needed to get there first, but he never explicitly said it was an actual race. They were being tricked from the beginning, but Rent saw through it, which is why he was in no real rush to get through the labyrinth. When it comes to being an adventurer, all that matters is completing the request within the allotted time frame, so there's never a need to rush. Rise would have appreciated being given this info a while ago, but Rent wanted them to learn to think for themselves, which is why he didn't mention it. The group exits the boss room and is greeted by a man by a desk who welcomes them as the first to successfully make it here. Rise and Laura are a lot more suspicious than they were when they first came in here, so they refuse to believe him until he shows them some identification that proves he is actually a guild worker. The man gladly provides said identification, and now assured that he is actually a guild staff member, the two can relax a little. The man then presents them with 3 badges, saying if they take these back to the guild, then they will be promoted to bronze rank adventurers, which is great and all, but since they were the first ones to make it here, Rise wants to know what that was promised to the first adventurers to get her will be. The guild staff member then pulls out 3 potion bottles complete with the holder set, and Rise is clearly happy to receive it. Now that they successfully passed the test, Rent asks if the two of them would be willing to take a brief detour with him before they leave the dungeon. They agree to follow him, so Rent leads them down a set of stairs that go to the 2nd floor of the dungeon. Neither of them have ever been here before, and according to Rent, it is a place beyond the understanding of the human mind, so he wanted to show them what they would be facing now that they are bronze rank. The 2nd floor of the dungeon leaves them in awe, as it is a whole forest biome. There is even a sun here despite them being underground, and far more strange things to be uncovered the deeper down you go. This excites both Rise and Laura, so much so that Rise wants to spend some time exploring the floor right now, but Rent says they had better head back to the guild since the test isn't officially over until they present the badges to the receptionist. Back in town, Rent and the others have managed to make it back safe and sound, although there were traps on the way back as well, so Rise and Laura are exhausted. They head back to the Adventurers Guild and present their badges to Sheila, who tells them that they have officially completed the exam, but when Rise asks if this means they can have their ranks raised, Sheila is a bit hesitant to answer because she doesn't know if they qualify yet. However, moments later, she gets handed a report from a coworker, and they learn that there was actually a hidden process to becoming a bronze-class adventurer. The guild has had this guy following them around to see what kind of people they are and what they do in certain situations, and if it turned out that they were bad people, then the guild reserves the right to deny them their promotion. But they have nothing to worry about, as the report says they are decent people. Rise wasn't really following what was said, but he heard that he and Laura passed, and that was good enough for him. He celebrates with Laura because this means they'll actually be able to earn enough money to live here together, so it was worth running away together for this even though Laura's parents didn't approve. Sheila doesn't know whether she should be happy or worried for them, but things like this happen fairly often, so she just lets them have their moment. Meanwhile, Rent just acknowledges to himself that he is back at his old rank once more. The group exits the guild, and both Rise and Laura thank Rent for coming along with them because they never could have made it through the labyrinth without his help. They'll make sure they never forget the lessons he has taught them, and because of those lessons, they feel like they are finally real adventurers. Laura would like to ask him to keep adventuring with them, but she can already tell that that's going to be impossible because Rent has a different goal from their own. That is probably why he was putting so much effort into teaching them about adventuring, so they could make it on their own without him. So they hope to adventure with him again someday. Both Sheila and Rent watch as the two return home, and Sheila comments on how good those kids are. While he was with them, Rent felt more like a parent than anything, but they also did a lot to make him feel welcomed, so he is grateful. Now that they are gone, Sheila turns to Rent and says she has a question to ask him. He already knows this probably about his original identity, so he asks if the guild is going to punish him for creating a fake identity for himself. because if so, he will simply never return to the guild again. He turns to walk away, but Sheila pulls him back and says she just wants to know what happened to him. That's all. He thought about running away, but Sheila was genuinely worried about him, so he decided it was worth telling her what happened to him. Once they are alone behind closed doors, he tells her that he has a problem he is dealing with right now, so what he's about to tell her must stay between them. Not even the guild can know about this because it would be really bad for him. Sheila tells him that she has no intention of telling the guild about him, partially because she doesn't know the details, but also because she wants to hear the full story from him first. She wants him to trust her, but if he can't take her word for it, she has prepared a magical contract which, once signed, will force a penalty on her if she reveals his secret. The penalty is if she tells anyone of Rent's secret. Then she will quit her job at the guild and travel to a country where slavery is legal, where she will then make herself a slave to the most pervy man available. Rent doesn't understand why she would go so far just to get him to confide in her, but it's because she really wants to help him, since it's because of him that she was able to grow up. He may not realize it, but there are tons of people who are grateful to him, so he should let her return the favor. Rent agrees to sign the contract and tell her what happened, so to begin, he shows her what his face looks like now. Sheila is shocked, and from her expression, Rent thinks she must regret asking about it now, but she regrets nothing and would much rather know if he were suffering so badly. She asks what happened to make him look this way, so Rent explains that he has become an undead monster. She did not know it was even possible to become one, but Rent can see that she is distressed, so before he continues, he asks her again if she is sure she wishes to try to help him. She is unable to answer, so Rent gets up to leave, but before he does, he clarifies that he has no intention of hurting anyone, even if he is an undead. But he also understands that it may be hard of her to believe him at this point. As he's about to walk out the door, Sheila calls out to him and says she believes him when he says he won't hurt anyone, because he has always been so kind to the people around him. She promises that she will help him, so if anything ever happens between the guild and him, he should tell her, so she'll do her best to resolve it. Rent ends up bringing her over to Lorraine's house because she insisted on getting to speak with her, so as Lorraine opens the door and sees Sheila, she jokes that Rent must be having a fling with her, but she's here to discuss serious matters, so they all talk while they have some of Rent's delicious cooking for dinner. Lorraine praises him for all the hard work he does around the house, but all he gets in exchange for now is that vial of her blood, which keeps him from getting bloodthirsty. Sheila understands the situation since Rent is currently aghast, but she warns him that he has been sticking out a little too much lately. There have been a lot of rookie adventurers going missing recently, and people are beginning to suspect Rent might have something to do with it. Most of the rumors are being spread out of jealousy, though, and Rent finds it flattering that people are jealous of his skills right now. Still, he'll need to lay low for a while so people won't be able to spread rumors about him, and he may not like it, but that means no labyrinth exploration for quite a while. The next day, Rise and Laura are back in the guild ready to take on their first quest as bronze-ranked adventurers, while Sheila and the guild master watch from above. He's happy to see the rookies working hard, but he still has his concerns about Rent with all the rumors going around. Sheila assures him that he was followed while he was in the dungeon, and the report says he's a good person, so there's nothing to worry about. This was the end of episode 7. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.